Hey, thank you for choosing this video. In this particular episode, we're going to be focusing on the growing trend of open source vendors changing their licensing schemes. Do we really need Kubernetes? And a roundup or a recap of the KubeCon Europe 2024. So if you want to hear more about those topics, please keep watching. Hello and welcome to the Cloud State of Play April 2024 episode. Now, you might be asking, where is Paul? Well, Paul is on holiday at the moment, so he's taking a well-earned rest for a week or so somewhere in Europe. I don't know where. I'll ask him when he's back. But in the meantime, I have a fantastic, super guest for you. Saim, I will ask him to do an intro in a minute. But Saim is a great friend. We've really clicked on a number of things. I've been on his webinars and talks. Hopefully now he's on mine as well, and we'll hopefully be doing a few more things together in the future as well. So I'm really excited to have Saim join me for this particular episode of Cloud State of Play. Saim, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to do this. And yeah, let's have a quick maybe intro, kind of a quick bio from yourself, and what do you normally get up to when you're not doing Cloud State of Play?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Richard. It's been a pleasure talking to you on your YouTube channel today. And very warm welcome to all the attendees who are watching us or actually watching the recording of this YouTube. So my name is Saim Safdar. I'm currently living in Pakistan, Islamabad. So my background is around, I started developing apps in 2016. So that's where my front-end development journey started. And then back up to the back-end development in 2017, 2018. And then later I moved into the DevOps in 2019. And that's where I started to see a plethora of tooling. And that's where how I headed towards to open source, because all of the toolings is actually come from the open source. And then look up the umbrella where this tooling is coming from, and that is basically from CNCF. So then I wanted to make sure how I can able to be more easily be approachable and talk to many people around the world. So that's give me CNCF, give me this ambassadorship. So that's where we kick-started the journey of doing some podcast, webinars, and bunch of some cool stuff as well. So as of today, I'm speaking to you. I am a CNCF ambassador, also a co-chair of multi-tenancy Con. That is a KubeCon co-located event. It's happened twice, KubeCon Chicago, KubeCon Paris, and now it's heading towards KubeCon Salt Lake. And we are actually working with some of the cool speakers to make sure the great agenda will be lined up. And also I do similar things as Richard is doing. Some podcasts. I did 106 episode, and hope people can actually go into the Cloud Native FM on YouTube, and they can actually enjoy some of the listening of the talk. And I do recommend, because I think I did episode with Richard on very early this year on platform engineering in 2024, and the stuff I learned and the Richard predicted is already happening, and I'm looking forward to talking about these predictions that Richard has actually spoken to my channel on as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I think we may have to revisit the platform engineering topic. I think, Saim, you and I, because I think there's certainly a lot happening there. There's lots of opinions around it. So, and I'm very keen on it as well. I've actually got some other stuff hopefully coming out very soon. I'm sure you guys will enjoy that particular talk around platform engineering, and definitely that conversation will continue. But platform engineering is not on our topic for this particular talk. So let's introduce the topics that we have for this particular episode. So again, we've chosen 3 as usual, so no change to the kind of normal format. So the first one that we have is the growing trend of open source vendors changing their licensing schemes. That's controversial, just to say the least, I think, in regards to that. The second one is, do we really still need Kubernetes? So again, slightly controversial, but I think that's going to be an interesting topic to go to. And we've got an article that we want to discuss around that. And the third one, Saim is here to really give us also a quick update on KubeCon Europe 2024, which happened recently. So he'll be giving us his recap on that. So those are the topics for this month. Okay, so let's have a quick start on the first topic, which is the growing trend of open source vendors changing their licensing schemes. Now, we know, and we've seen a lot of headlines around the same, right? And you and I think, I've probably discussed this offline as well a number of times, and I've certainly discussed it with Paul. I think we've actually mentioned it slightly when one particular, I think, license or two were actually changed a while back. I seem to remember the August edition or August episode of Cloud State of Play last year. We did mention that, and we did a bit of coverage around the Red Hat changes. So certainly Red Hat's kind of really caused a lot of concern and sort of antagonism around the the open source community. I think the initial sort of point of contention was around CentOS a few years ago, and then more recently kind of affecting the downstream projects of open source around Red Hat Linux. So they've kind of certainly been in that ring, unfortunately. And then again, more recently, the likes of HashiCorp, where the Terraform license has been changed from, I think, the Mozilla public license, MPL, to the business source license, as it's called, the BSL or BUSL, as it's sometimes called. And again, that's actually caused a lot of contention, actually to the point where the Terraform open source project has been forked. So a new an open source version or forked version called OpenTF, as it was at the beginning. And then after the Linux Foundation actually adopting the project, they changed their name to OpenTofu. So that was back in September of last year, 2023. What's kind of, and obviously we can mention some other names like Redis and MongoDB, Elastic, Sentry. There's a whole host of those kind of, this growing trend that's happening. Saim, what's kind of your take on this?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a very interesting topic, and people are trying to ask these questions every day. I think before going to the bed is what gonna happening and why is gonna happening in open source. So those are the very important question to consider and try. We need to find answer as soon as possible. And I was speaking to last Thursday on the similar topic with and the company was actually has some kind of similar situation, but a rather different mindset. That is Buoyant Cloud from the Linkerd. So those who actually know what the Linkerd open source project is, what they did is they actually not actually changing the licensing model, but they actually changing the way the release artifact of the project is actually going into the public. And that is, they actually have two variant of it. One, you actually fork the repo and make a new vendor and make sure these releases is managed vendor that is not a buoyant, or another thing you can do is you can actually go into the third party, or you can actually go into the buoyant, and that they basically give you the Linkerd distribution for the stable releases. The Linkerd variant of the open source, so they doesn't change the open source licensing, but they actually change the way the project is going to be the masses for the production use cases. It's around stable version and the edge releases. For the stable releases, then you need a buoyant link enterprise for Linkerd. So they make this change. And I asked the same question to William, as you actually mentioning, is where is actually open source is heading towards too. And he said that for a long time in the Linux era, we've been able to have some free public contributor who submit their project into the upstream version, and that the community is backing up all the things. But you know that we need some kind of backing it up. Like why you are doing this, what is the value out of it? For a small time of things, we can do it for the third party activities or second priority item, but for the longer stable version, to making sure this will be continued project, you need some sort of backing it up model. So that is lacking in the open source as of today. Now all the open source maintainers are not
much paid off. And that's where the problem arises. And the William is actually mentioning on my podcast,
Yeah.
is becoming open source is becoming a corporate charity for the bigger organization. You're making some great progress, and the corporate charity picking up those projects and they're running the business out of it. But those who are actually contributing to the project is not getting much attention, not paid off, and they feel faded from all these business aspects, and they kind of feel anxiety and depression. And that's a problem in the open source today.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, again, there was I picked up on something called the functional source license, or the FSL, which some people have actually, adopted. So that's described as the evolution of BSL, which was the business source license. And then the description that I got was, it said, deepens the commitment to balancing user freedom and developer sustainability. It's seen as a compelling option for open source minded SaaS companies who wish to grant freedom without harmful free riding. So I guess it's kind of, in order to get to a particular point where, the company needs to, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, where you're kind of trying to, you want to provide the open source, but in order to do that, you need to attract the community, developers, coders, and so on, to maintain the project and keep it going, and obviously, hopefully, make some revenue out of an enterprise version, let's say, of that project, right? Which is fine. I think everybody's kind of accepted that, but that's kind of a hard cycle to maybe maintain. So I can appreciate some of that, but obviously, for the kind of the purest of, people are kind of very purist about open source. They see this as a negative, definitely, and they kind of, as soon as something like that happens, they move away, they fork the project, they try and go off and do something different.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what is you currently noticing, and everybody is noticing, what happening is, like, we do not want any company to own the open source side of a thing. So what ends up happening is like, whenever you change the licenses, that is basically you wanting to change the philosophy of that open source project. You wanted to make sure somebody is using the project, is giving you something back, and that when something is actually you receiving, is you actually use this investment to making sure this project is smooth running, and for the next 5 to 10 years, it will stay as it is. But what happening is, like, this is the philosophy you want to change. But you are the only one who are thinking on these lines. But the rest of the ecosystem is not adopt to your philosophy. So they see as a negative. So what end up happening is that the foundation or some of the bigger organization is usually look up the project, and they're not happy the way this project changing the license. They go into the foundation, they fork the repo, and they announce it to the public that we are actually using this project as an open source with these licenses, with this new name. And that's where this conversation is end, mostly. We don't know what's happened there, what's happening not there. So when people thinking about the one company did change the license, how do, as human, we trust that the next company will not do the same thing? So that is the question. And I think it's a very, very generous question to ask.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see how many more, sort of these types of vendors really kind of start adopting some of these alternative, licensing models, and whether there is actually something, that can be done in order to, to kind of, stop that movement or not. I don't think there is. I mean, if they're kind of the owners of that particular project, sure, okay, that might be a, CNCF project or something. But if it's, something that they're kind of driving forward by themselves, then I don't know if that's going to be possible, really. I mean, the likes of sort of Terraform and so on have kind of been part of the landscape, but they're clearly still owned by HashiCorp and so on. So they if they control the project, then I guess it's up to them. So I can appreciate the difficulty, and it's excruciating to kind of wanting to maintain the project and see it not just survive but actually thrive as well, right? To do well, in other words, while still kind of trying to maintain that sort of open source sort of effect, if you like, on it as well. So I mean, I guess for the purists, as we said, at the end of the day, it's not open source, and that is dangerous. That's the kind of the unprecedented sort of foggy path, if you like, that some of these vendors that have decided to change their license, they've decided to kind of go down that particular path. Okay, so excellent. Let's move on to the second topic, Saim, which was do we really need Kubernetes? Now, again, another controversial title, I think, for this particular topic. It is based on an article which I picked up on and I shared with you, and I thought it would be kind of interesting just to go through that and get your thoughts on it. So the article itself is by a chap called Saim Safdar, who is the field CTO at Civo. Civo is a UK-based alternative cloud, public cloud. I actually did a talk with their CEO at KubeCon earlier this year. So if you look on the channel, I'll try and provide the link. It might appear somewhere. I'll try and make it appear somewhere on the screen here. And yeah, if you have a look on the channel, and it'll be in the description of the video as well. The link will be there. I did a short interview with him about Civo as well. So yeah, quite interesting organization. But anyway, so the particular articles fairly short, but it just kind of hit on a couple of points that I thought would be interesting to go through with you and just kind of get your thoughts on it. And it kind of ties in with a panel talk as well that I've done, which is not out yet, folks. So keep a lookout for that. I will try and provide the link in the description of the video as and when that comes out as well. But it was just kind of looking at, where is kind of Kubernetes now? Is it kind of become standard and part of the furniture, as we say? And whereas kind of, I think the article starts, it says, it kind of was the kind of the glue of how you kind of, put together and installed and maintained infrastructure. I think he kind of starts around that. But then he kind of talks a little bit more about, Kubernetes is still hard to do. And that's a true statement as far as he's concerned. And Kubernetes is a quote unquote beast to implement as well. So I guess that's kind of his view is really, we don't necessarily need Kubernetes. Whereas kind of my perspective was a little bit more about, it's kind of Kubernetes has really become quite established now. And it's not something that we either may not need, we may not actually need it, or we may actually not even think about it. It just becomes part of our architecture design and it's in there somewhere, but actually our focus is, somewhere else on maybe an AI workload or our containers and, or whatever else. What was your take on it, Saim? What did you think of the article?
Yes, I think it's been a lot in the conversation last year. I think before the end of the last year, I think November, December, even the KubeCon talk is mentioning around Kubernetes, and specifically this question is actually a prerequisite to what already we discussed about the open source, and Kubernetes is actually coming from the open source.
Yeah.
So I kind of relate of the two umbrellas, how these intersection, and we're actually heading towards. So I think Saim Pathak did a wonderful job of curating and discussing some critical point on this blog as well. But I think generally, if you look at the Kubernetes, I tried to give you the example of the space for those who are the space explorer. They can easily kind of relate what I'm trying to say. If I look at the Andromeda galaxy today, I look and I set a beam up there, then the light is reflected back to me. That's Andromeda galaxies might be 2 million years before when I look up the image. It's not the today's image, it's the past image.
Sure.
So that is same with the Kubernetes. If you look at the beam, if you set the beam inside the Kubernetes, so you look at your past, but nobody wasn't quite sure what my future in Kubernetes.
Sure.
Nobody able to answer this. I think mostly nobody is kind of a very, very harsh term. So I can tell you that mostly we're not sure what the future kind of look like in Kubernetes.
Right.
So I think if you look at the current state of the open source, current state of Kubernetes, we not talk about replica set, deployment service, ingress controllers, the smallest construct, we forget about it. Now we're talking about how the business app that is running on Kubernetes can be delivered to developer so he can every day make some adjustment into the apps based on the business need, and my stuff go into the production, and I can basically set measuring metrics.
Right.
How efficient my developer is today with Kubernetes and how efficient we were before Kubernetes. So I think if you look at the standard metrics today, so Kubernetes give you some good autonomy of deploying code into the production. And your life of developers quite better easy with how do we standardizing the tooling and deploying into the production. But the management layer that the DevOps team is operating is kind of a very heavy now. They are doing everything for everyone. And that is we don't want to do. And that's where we see a stuff like platform as a product, basically a separation of concern between platform operator and the application developers. So basically they work on standard isolation, kind of interlinked, but they're making sure the stuff that I'm doing is not being replicated by the DevOps team. Because in Kubernetes, one thing you're quite sure that when the application developer spending 1 hour on something, then it's delivered to the DevOps engineer, they're exactly doing the same stuff. And then they end up battling like, this is already been done, bro. Why you are doing it? I heard a lot about this statement. I want to know from you as well.
Yeah. No, I do agree. And I mean, I think the article is quite interesting because he's kind of saying, do we really need Kubernetes? But then the discussion or the sort of the argument points are around the complexity. So yes, it is, if you're kind of going to sort of, roll your own, so to speak, it is a beast, and you need to have to kind of, contend with that. But then he does look at also some of the, the XKS services from the public cloud providers or hyperscalers. So the EKS, AKS, the GKE, and so on type of solutions as well. And he says that those do make things, easier, of course. But then obviously with that is kind of a cost element. So you have to kind of be quite efficient, with the costing. And I do know from the CEO interview that I did, that actually Civo offer the control plane free in their Kubernetes service. So that is a difference between Civo, I guess, and the kind of the top three sort of hyperscalers. And I guess kind of Saim is kind of bringing it to that to that point, and that's a fair point to make, because obviously Civo's has got an advantage with that. And then just staying with the cost element a little bit, he also mentions things like K3S, Talos, and some of the other sort of smaller footprint Kubernetes distributions which you can take. And I guess that's, those are more wrapped up, right? They're kind of more encased, if you like, so that if you are going to be actually, I don't know, maybe just kind of testing in non-production environments, test environments, if you want to kind of play with that or test your workloads on that, then those would be easier to maybe make use of, because they're kind of pre-packaged, ready to go, and you just kind of install the whole thing, and everything that the Kubernetes cluster needs is basically there and it's completed and done. So I agree with that. And the point that I was making at kind of about, Kubernetes being boring, that just kind of essentially says that it's mature, that it's established. But that's not necessarily, we don't need it anymore. I think that's kind of just saying it's, because it's kind of becoming part of the furniture, part of the architecture that we're implementing, it's not the main thing that we necessarily would focus on anymore when we actually come to provisioning something or implementing our project. And in certain cases, of course, it still is quite important, but not necessarily always, and especially as the versions kind of progress and it gets better and better. And then kind of it's quite, as we said, it's kind of quite simplified with things like the XKS services from the hyperscalers. The code is matured, so that was another point, I think, unlike sort of some of the earlier days of the releases. I remember with things like certain codes being in tree, as they called them, so you had your storage and networking actually being as part of the sort of the Kubernetes code. But yeah, with the advent of things like CRDs, CSI, CNI, that's really made it much easier to integrate really any third-party sort of platform,
Yes.
whether it's hardware, software integration, and to customize things as well with CRDs and so on. So I think overall I agree with it. I don't know if you had any other thoughts, Saim.
I think like if you look at the Kubernetes, and I think sometimes the wording is difficult. Like we're trying to understand this point that the Kubernetes is a standard layer, and you can start to use like, do we really need Kubernetes? Kubernetes is a boring. Basically, you're trying to convey this messaging to the masses that this is becoming a layer, whether you like it or not, but this is stay with you. And if you forget about it, it's totally up to you. And then folks will keep discussing how to forget about these layer. And that's where the platform engineering, platform as a product, is these stuff comes up. I think I can give you another Formula One car example today for this, and kind of a wrap up this discussion. Is basically, if you look at the Formula One car, there is so many pieces in there.
Yeah.
If you look at how much of the speed this car is, it possesses 325, 345 kilomiles per hour.
Yeah.
You see, all the stuff is actually in one box.
Yeah.
So now, with the Formula One car, you change the mind of the people that you can go with that speed. So this is the winner. You win on this spectrum, that you create this philosophy. As human on the landing car, we can achieve these miles of the speed.
Yeah.
That's the same true with the Kubernetes. We came up with this philosophy. We can move to production faster. You can go faster. Even the small team today, they stuff in the production frequently, very much often. And then they not actually fear enough the things got broken, because it's a resilient and failover system that the Kubernetes got.
Yeah.
Now the way the car achieved the velocity of 350 or 60 kilometers per hour, you see some kind of aerodynamics, the wheels opening up in some particular area that the air passes through, air downward and downward force, and the flooring. That's where the technology come into play. That's where we are not able to show today, like which technology I will be using for 360 kilometer per hour speed of deployment in the future. And that's where all the discussion happening today.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, I think in order to answer the question, do we really need Kubernetes? Yeah, I think we still do. And also there are other factors as well. So, some folks are taking it in towards the sort of the AI foundation model training, and there's lots of architecture and designs and stuff like that coming up, or coming out for that. And those all involve Kubernetes. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not going to go there. That's not, it's not a discussion point for today, but it's certainly kind of being, pointed in the sort of the AI and large language model sort of direction. So that's kind of, Kubernetes finding another use for itself, if you like, and making the provisioning of those sorts of things, a lot easier through Kubernetes. And talking of easier, obviously, it does depend to a degree, in terms of it does depend on, how large is your estate, right? Of how
Yes.
many containers are you, kind of putting into production? How frequently are you kind of, provisioning or scaling, updating and things like that? And for that, you do need an orchestrator. You do need something that will deal with this. Otherwise, you're up to your eyeballs with scripts and various other things to essentially do the job that Kubernetes would do for you. And also the
Yes.
other side of it is obviously this automation and so on. I can't believe it. I'm actually defending Kubernetes. But I mean, no, but seriously, that is those things are the sorts of things that we've been, aiming to do. And that this was the whole point of doing it. Now, it may not be in the future, it may not be Kubernetes, it may be something else that we will use, or derivative of Kubernetes, or a different, distro or a fork or something. But the essence of what's actually doing is still required. And then the other side, as I said, it's boring, it's kind of mature and so on. But yeah, all projects eventually reach that. When you put a lot of emphasis and, focus on it, as much as Kubernetes has had, that will eventually happen. It's inevitable that will happen. Then it's really a matter of how you can keep it, fresh and innovative as you go forward. And he does also, I think, mention in the article the example of DHH, which is a guy who's actually made a lot of, he's made himself quite famous on the interwebs, so to speak. I think his name is David Heinemeier Hansen. I'm probably butchering the name. He's from Hey World, which is, I think, a company that provides something or other services, chat services, email services, something like that. And they're quite famous. DHH is a person which is quite famous for repatriation, for actually leaving the cloud. But he's still running, a sort of cloud native technology, not necessarily Kubernetes. I think is running something else, but they're still doing it on containers, is my understanding. So anyway, again, another topic for another day. But I appreciate your insights on this one. So we'll again provide the link to the article from the field CTO of Siva. I think it's quite interesting to have a read. And he's got some other stuff on there which is also interesting, not connected, but also quite interesting. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to our third topic, which was a KubeCon Europe 2024 Paris recap. So Saim, let me get your take on it first. Let me ask you a little bit about kind of what you thought and things like that. But let me kind of get your take on it, and then I'll maybe chime in with some points of my own that I've kind of gathered since then as well. So I actually didn't go to the event. I couldn't make it, but it would be interesting just to get your recap on it, please.
Yes, absolutely. I also haven't attended in person, but I spoke to a lot of the folks who are already been there as well. And I also been a part of the co-chair for the multi-tenancy con as well. So I have calculated some of the highlights. So please forgive me for some of the marketing term, because these are some of the article I look up to the internet and try to understand what is actually happening there.
Sure.
So once again, apologies for some marketing words, but let me go through it.
Yeah.
So Kubernetes and cloud native technologies are likely to see rising interest as ways to solve the distributed demand of AI. And it was fascinating to witness NVIDIA presentation as the second keynote on this opening day, and they are discussing around accelerating AI workload with GPUs in Kubernetes. So this talk is available. I really like the phrasing and how it's actually explained. So folks, please go into the CNCF YouTube channel and enjoy the talk there. Other things, platform engineering once again takes a center stage for the second KubeCon in a row. And they're actually talking about embracing product-centric thinking for the win, growing emphasis on developer experience and refining development cycles. Security remains a top priority in the industry, and why not? the increasing prominence of end-user narrative in the CNCF communities, ongoing bundling of tools and framework persist, and WASM gain pretty much attraction as a trending topic during the KubeCon Paris. And speaking of WASM, the Fermion technology and their maintainer spun up a new tool called SpinCube that install and configure WASM runtime to run WASM power serverless functions alongside your existing container-based workload and uses all the conventional Kubernetes tool to easily get it installed and set up. There's another tool from Microsoft. They announced during the KubeCon as well. Retina is a cloud agnostic open source Kubernetes network observability platform. It provides actionable insight to cluster network administrator, cluster security administrator, DevOps engineer, DevOps and SecOps and compliance use cases. The one use case I really highlight and really interesting is collect customizable telemetry, which can be exported to multiple storage options such as Prometheus, Azure Monitor, and other vendor, and visualized in a variety of ways like Grafana, Azure Log Analytics, and other vendors. So I stop here because there are a bunch of other, but one do I shout out before I heading back to Richard is Cloud Native Artificial Intelligence white paper that the CNCF actually wrote.
Yes.
So the basically is basically an intersection of how AI and cloud native offering an opportunity for organization to develop unprecedented capabilities. And once again, really, really sorry for some of the marketing words.
No, that's okay. I think that's a good wrap up. And I was aware of the NVIDIA keynote because like I said, I have kind of reviewed some of those. And I've read about SpinCube somewhere else, this is part of the CNCF or KubeCon stuff. But I wasn't aware of Retina, so that's an interesting one. That's something that I'll definitely pick up on that. Yeah, I mean, again, for me, I kind of did a Copilot summary, Microsoft Copilot summary of that. It's a great way to get things summarized. I do recommend that, folks. So check it out if you get a chance. And yeah, platform engineering came up. So again, key theme of the conference. Day zero track apparently called Platform Engineering Day Europe was all about really sort of the platform engineering topic. And discussions, I think, were around things like best practices and DevOps and common elements needed for success, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. AI was obviously a theme, as you said. We're kind of looking at how we can make use of AI, or we can use cloud native to kind of enable AI and make use of AI through sort of all these sort of solutions like Kubernetes and whatever, all these platforms, cloud native platforms, and so on. I have some doubts around that space because I'm just kind of putting on my cynical hat on for a and skeptic hat on for a minute or two. But that's something that I'll pick up on in the future. Maybe we'll do a quick topic on it on a future episode. For me, it's kind of, yes, it's good that kind of NVIDIA was there, and again, I've seen some people putting out architectures and designs for how to do your own large language model or train your foundation model, whatever, using Kubernetes, for example, or a kind of a cloud native, using a cloud native architecture, cloud native design. But for me, it's AI is a HPC workload, and HPC works best when it's on bare metal and nothing else between it, really. So anyway, but that's something to come back to. I'm just kind of being a little bit cynical when it comes to that. The other one I picked up on was responsible innovation. So this was around kind of focus on cost and sustainability. I think these were obviously probably running themes. I know that there were actually a couple of talks that were quite interesting around FinOps and things like that. So again, that's all kind of in that sustainability and cost management theme. And then there was obviously security. You mentioned security, so that continues to be a kind of a big thing around cloud native. I'm probably going to be doing some talks around that, maybe with Aquasec or somebody at some point, just to kind of pick up on that landscape a little bit more and get a little bit deeper into the cloud native aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, again, there's a number of security themes, if you like, in that space. As to whether they've kind of progressed a great deal, I'm not sure. That's maybe I'll dig through a few more of the talks and see if there is actually any elements of innovation and new stuff that's maybe been introduced. And then the other one was kind of product thinking. Now, I wasn't really sure exactly what that particular theme of the conference was about, but that's the summary I got, and I think it was kind of looking at things from a sort of a product perspective, and maybe even touched on sort of the monetization of some of these products and projects as well. I'll do a little bit more digging around that, so I'll include some more links in the description of the video to get on that and provide some more details. And maybe we can just kind of pick up on some of the highlight talks, you and I, and we'll include them in the description of the video. Saim, I think that'll be a good thing to do. Was there any other things that you picked up on? Any other interesting points that came your way around KubeCon?
Yes, I think one more, kind of very interesting innovation happening once again from another vendor called Microsoft. They have a tool called Dapper, and Dapper is your distributed application runtime. It's a very fancy name. I love the name of the project. So it's basically a venting system, but it's gained a lot of credibility in the open source communities, and the developer community is really shining with this tool. I think they now announced, in their Microsoft Ignite and also during the KubeCon, they actually highlighted a lot their new CNCF sandbox project called Redis. And once again, it's some marketing word, but some very good features in it there. Right. Redis is a cloud native, cloud agnostic application platform that enables developers and platform engineers who support them to collaborate on delivering and managing cloud native application that follow corporate best practices for cost, operations, and security by default. There's a lot of words in there, but basically it's a tool between a separation of concern between developers and platform engineers. So it's basically you can write some recipes as a platform engineers, and those recipes run by the developer, and their application infrastructure will be stood up without ever touching infrastructure in itself. So it's a very happy space. During the Microsoft Ignite, the Azure CTO and the Brendan Burns did a keynote kind of a session on this one tool, and this tells me how much they're actually interested in this space.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Brendan Burns is quite is I think one of the original creators of Kubernetes when he was back at Google. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. That's yeah. I think these are interesting things, and I think Microsoft is riding high at the moment because I think they spotted the recent Linux. I think there was a Linux bug or something. It was actually a Microsoft engineer who spotted it, and somebody said, if this is not the opportunity to welcome Microsoft into the open source world, I don't know what will be. Which opportunity will be. So this is that opportunity, I think, for the open source community to embrace Microsoft and actually believe Microsoft in terms of wanting to do good in the cloud and open source space. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, I guess that's kind of maybe all part of that, all those sort of recent happenings. So yeah, okay, quite positive. Okay, all right. So I think we're kind of pretty much there in terms of what we wanted to cover. Saim, I wanted to really thank you very much for your input. I really appreciate your insights, all your thoughts, and for bringing us a summary of KubeCon. As we said, we'll include lots of other stuff in the description of the video, so do look out for that, please. Yeah, and I just wanted to thank you guys for watching, and bye for now. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.